Hello everyone, I'm Fozzie or Cam, and I'm here as always with my co-host Will. How are you doing today, Will?
I'm doing great, Cam. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic, and we got a great schedule of topics to talk about today. But right off the bat, Will, I want to kind of talk about something that's kind of gonna lead probably into our next episode. Um, and that's just movies we've seen recently. Last episode I spoke briefly about Marty Supreme. But yeah, there are definitely some other movies I'd like to speak about. But Will, do you have any movies you've seen recently that you'd like to recommend to anyone, or just that you thought were good or bad even?
Yeah, so one that I would love to talk about is even though it's been a few months since this movie came came out, I would still love to share my opinion about it here on the podcast. So, Avatar: Fire and Ash released in December of last year, and going into the movie, I was like, okay, James Cameron has proven to be a master of the blockbuster who knows what he's doing, but I was like, he made uh, two Avatar movies, which were just so epic in size and scale and visual effects that I was just like, is he going to be able to do it again for a third time to the same extent? And to his credit, the movie was definitely better than I was expecting. The trailers that came out for Avatar: Fire and Ash, I didn't think they were bad by any stretch. I thought they were good, but they didn't knock my socks off. So I lowered my expectations going into the film. And I will say for the first, I'd say like 75% of the movie, I was hooked, I was immersed in it, and it was much better than I was expecting it to be. And I feel like James Cameron continued to do a great job of while he is throwing dazzling visual effects at you, he's also making you invested in the characters in the film as well. So I am not hating on this film by any stretch. I think it is a film made with craft and care. This is the only thing, though, that if an Avatar 4 ends up getting made, like James Cameron hopes to be able to make it, this is the one thing I think he has to change. There have absolutely been examples of movies that have been very long that I don't think suffered from being very long at all. Avengers Endgame is a 3 hour plus film. I think that movie being 3 hours plus worked fantastic. Titanic, which is another movie that James Cameron just so happened to direct, that movie is over 3 hours, but I feel like that movie did not suffer from being that long either. And I feel like James Cameron did such a brilliant job of spending like a full, I'd say, hour and a half of that film to introduce you to Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet's characters and get you invested in them before the whole sinking of the ship and all that. So I think there are absolutely, long 3 hour plus movies that can work. But with this one, and even though we like to refer to this person as he who must not be named, I do want to say he who must not be named did bring up a point that I think was very valid that dragged the final, I'd say, 25% of it down from the first 75% of it, is that the final battle just lasted for such a long time, and it was just, and it's not that you don't care about the characters, but it's just, action sequence after action sequence in there isn't really room to pause or catch your breath or breathe or have a quieter scene amidst all of the action going on. So it just got to a point for me in the final 25% of the film where I was like, okay, this is a movie made with craft and skill, but I just think James Cameron dragged it on and made it longer than it needed to be. So this would be my advice to James Cameron if he gets the opportunity to make an Avatar 4. James Cameron, you have created an immersive, captivating world with Avatar, but you don't need to make every single movie 3 hours plus. I think if he makes Avatar 4, if he gets a chance to make that a 2.5 hour film instead of a 3 hour plus film, I will be more than okay with that as an audience member. And I would also prefer it to what he did in Avatar: Fire and Ash.
Yeah. And the thing you sort of touched on here is, he also directed Titanic, which is a good thing because you know that he's capable of making these long movies
Yeah.
and it's still not having as many issues in the final act. So it's not like you're asking for something unrealistic.
Yep.
And on this topic of movies you've seen recently, I meant to ask you about this. You've been watching some documentaries by Jeremy Workman as of late. Is what's drawing you to these documentaries specifically?
I would say what I've been drawn to with them is he directs documentaries in ways that I haven't necessarily seen other documentary filmmakers do. I feel like if a character goes through something really traumatic in their life, Jeremy Workman, or I feel like a typical documentary might kind of have that um, at the start of the doc to kind of hook audiences on it and draw audiences in. But Jeremy Workman, he directs his documentaries more like stories to where things get revealed throughout the course of the film instead of being shown all at the beginning to hook audience members. And that I feel like is one of the best things he does. You will think his documentaries are one thing, and then he'll throw you for a loop and bring in something else that's entirely different from what you would have expected the documentary to continue to be. So I would say those are definitely some of the skills that he has that have drawn me to him.
Yeah, I totally get that. It seems like he directs a documentary like he kind of would a movie. And that's
Yep,
a really
exactly.
cool concept. But for me, the movie I've seen pretty recently is the film The Town. And obviously, me being from Massachusetts, it's a really cool thing because it's a Boston movie. I've seen a lot of the things that were shown in this movie, The Town. It's directed by Ben Affleck. It stars Ben Affleck. Features Jeremy Renner, Blake Lively, just with tremendous performances all around. I believe Jeremy Renner was actually nominated for an Oscar for this role, which is awesome. Yeah, on the surface, you might look at the town and be like, "Oh, it's a crime thriller. I've seen 100 of these." No, I think it goes deeper than that. The character writing here is just on another level for this type of movie, and it doesn't have to be this solid. It doesn't have to have this solid of character writing. I mean, like I said, we've seen a bunch of these movies just worse. But it does. It has its characters are handled amazing, and then the performance all around are just outstanding. The direction here from Ben Affleck k- didn't shock me per se, but I was impressed nonetheless. And why I say it didn't shock me is because I already know he's capable of directing good projects because he's done so a bunch of times in the past. But yeah, that being said, I was still super thrilled with what I saw from Ben in this movie from a directorial standpoint. I like the twists and turns that this movie takes. Yeah, overall, it's just an awesome Boston movie. The scenes at Fenway Park are really amazing and just a really creative use of the city. I thought that was really fun. So, yeah, this is going down on my list as some of the best crime movie content I've seen ever. I was really impressed by this film. And something else I was impressed by, which I never got a chance to talk about on the podcast, but I actually rewatched it again recently, and that was the film A Real Pain. I was blown away by this movie the first time, and honestly, the second time I might have even been more blown away. It touches on a really troubling matter, uh, one of which being mental health, but it talks about more issues that people struggle with, and that's just amazing. And the fact that it's able to kind of sort of keep you laughing throughout kind of is amazing. You had a chance to see this movie, right, Will?
Uh, that one I don't think I've had a
No,
chance
okay.
to see.
But
Yeah.
I thought it was phenomenal, and I'd recommend anyone to watch this. Kieran Culkin, just honestly, with the obvious standout performance, won the Oscar for it. But I mean, I'm a huge Kieran Culkin fan, as I'm a big Succession fan as well. But I don't want that to overshadow Jesse Eisenberg, who wrote, directed, and also starred in this movie, and he was phenomenal. Let's just start from a writing standpoint. He's able to write lines that are funny, sad, beautiful, all at the same time. And that's something that's really impressive. And that's something you kind of don't really always see from writers, it's a struggle to see to maintain that balance, And that also being the director of the film too is that's a lot of work. And this film looks beautiful. It's shot amazing. The editing is perfect. The pacing, uh it was beautiful, it was beautiful. An amazing directorial debut, I believe, from Jesse Eisenberg. And if not, it's one of the first few directorial projects from Jesse, and I was blown away. And his performance, like I was saying, I don't want it to be overshadowed by Kieran because it was also beautiful. He plays this character like you could think he's like that in real life, It's an amazing performance from Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin as well. Tackles some really important issues and themes. Talks about grief a lot, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film, and for something that packed with emotions, feelings, style, it only comes in an hour and a half. So it's just truly amazing that he's able to pack all of that in to this shorter, film. And then it got that Oscar supporting actor win. It's a legendary movie. I'd urge anyone, to at least check it out. But speaking of checking it out, how about the Patriots check out signing a new wide receiver one? Because the Patriots just released their old wide receiver one, Stephon Diggs. I can't say I'm shocked that we released Stephon Diggs, well, just because I think it was mainly because of the off the field issues, but I also wasn't completely happy with his on the field performance either because he had a handful of good games during the regular season, but just fell asleep when the playoffs started. Around Super Bowl time, well, I remember us saying we need Diggs to do good if we want to win these games. He didn't, and we lost Super Bowl, So, I mean, three catches from your wide receiver one in the Super Bowl is a little embarrassing. You could say, yeah, JSN didn't do anything either, but they also have a fully defined running back, and we're still figuring that out. And that's not a fault to our team, us not having a fully developed running back yet. I mean, Ramondre still played great, Travion Henderson is going to be great, So I don't fault that, but at the very least, I expected more from Diggs. So, while disappointed it didn't work out a little bit better here in New England. I think honestly releasing him at his age and with his shenanigans in mind, um, it was probably the right decision. Will, do you think this was the right choice for the New England Patriots?
Yeah, I'm not gonna really criticize this choice much because you mentioned the off the field issues, Cam, which can be a detriment to the culture of a team, and and you don't want that impacting the team in any way. But what I ultimately come back to is I trust this era of the Patriots. I trust Robert Kraft. I know they lost the Super Bowl, but I trust Robert Kraft and I trust Mike Vrabel to make decisions that are in the best interest of the team. If Bill Belichick was still the coach of the New England Patriots and this happened, I would be maybe a little less trusting. But I trust Robert Kraft and Mike Vrabel in this regime to make decisions that'll be in the best interest of the team. So that's why I'm okay with this decision. And I think not to compare this version of the Patriots to the Patrick Mahomes Chiefs because that's a team that has won three Super Bowls recently, and this
Sure.
new era of the Patriots haven't won three Super Bowls. But the Chiefs let go of Tyreek Hill, and they didn't skip a beat. They were able to win two more Super Bowls after he left. So I feel like,
Wow, that's crazy. I
I
didn't
feel
even
like,
realize that that was a
yeah.
statistic. Wow.
So I feel like sometimes like when you release a quality receiver, sometimes it gives other people the opportunity to step up and shine too. So I feel like the Chiefs situation proved that it's not always a bad thing.
So what I'm hearing from you, Will, and this is actually painting this in a new light, is we might not necessarily have to go for a true wide receiver one, which is kind of what I've been pushing for. Um, signing an AJ Brown, a Brian Thomas Jr. I don't know, maybe drafting someone. I don't know, but we need someone to lead this offense. Is what I was thinking. But sort of what you're saying is you think it's possible for someone like Kayshon Boutte or Pop Douglas, Kyle Williams, Efton Chisholm, Mac Hollins, one of them to step up. Are you saying that's a big possibility? Because I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it could be smart to acquire someone like AJ Brown. I'm not voting against that in any way, but I feel like what made Bill Belichick so brilliant as a coach when he was at the peak of his powers is he would be able to get great seasons out of players that you wouldn't necessarily expect that you wouldn't have necessarily expected to see great seasons from. And if there's a coach that would be able to develop somebody from in-house into a greater version of what they previously were, Mike Vrabel is a coach who I think has the skill set to potentially do that.
I think that's a huge possibility, especially from what we've seen from someone like Kayshon Boutte this year. He made some insane plays, and it being so early in his career, his obvious connection he has with Drake May. I could totally see this, possibly working out. But like you said, yes, it would be great to have AJ Brown on our team. My two people I want for our wide receiver one, if we were to pick someone up, if we were to get someone or trade, whatever, would be Brian Thomas Jr. Just because I don't think he'll have as big of a role if he ends up staying in Jacksonville, just because they draft what's his name? They drafted the cornerback wide receiver combo. Forget his name from last year, first overall pick. I forget Heisman winner, I believe. They drafted from last year, and recently acquiring someone like Jacoby Myers, who is a veteran presence. So, and also kind of underperforming last year. On top of that, it might be time for BTJ to move on, and I see him as a wide receiver one. I think he can certainly be that. He's young. He's one of the most athletic wide receivers in the NFL. He's fast, right? But then on the other side, you get someone like AJ Brown, who's older than someone like BTJ, which is another good reason for getting Brian Thomas. But he's not at that Stephon Diggs age where he's kind of on the downhill of his career. I think he's still, at the top. And you could say, oh, he didn't do great last year. I don't think that was his fault necessarily, and I think that's a reason why he might want to leave. But he can bring that veteran presence. He's a good guy, He's a genuine good guy. He has some beef with the Eagles or whatever, but that's different than the stuff Diggs had going on. It's not off the field issues. He's actually a really prominent mental health advocate, which is an awesome thing for a wide receiver to be. He's a good guy, so that's a step in the right direction already. Coming off of the Stephon Diggs arc, but yeah, I'd really love to see AJ Brown on their team. And my main thing, who coached AJ Brown for the majority of his career? Mike Vrabel. So why would he not want to go back to the team to the coach that brought him so much success, brought him to be the player that he is? So yeah, I think that's the most likely and probably my number one choice to come here. And I mentioned his age. That age can kind of be a good thing just because he can be there. He can be like a buffer while someone like Kayshon Boutte is developing, and eventually he'll get to, that Stephon Diggs age where he starts to kind of fall down, but it won't matter because we'll have, a developed Kayshon Boutte. We'll have people who are who are just getting to the top of their game or at the top of the game while he kind of goes down, and he can still be that veteran presence. So I can see that totally working out here in New England, and it's made even more likely just with Mike Vrabel being our head coach. I will be a little worried if we don't sign anyone, but that means that they are confident in someone like Kayshon Boutte, so I'm willing to see both things happening. Um, one more little NFL topic that kind of messes up the Patriots, but it's also a big NFL move. Max Crosby is on the Ravens. That got announced last night. Um, you know, they're probably going to be really good, the Ravens. We just talked about the Patriots wide receiver room. They kind of have that similar situation over there. I don't think they have a true one. Zay Flowers is a good wide receiver, but he's sort of that slot guy and not that deep threat. Maybe they thought having DeAndre Hopkins that could have been the deep threat, but no, he's definitely on the downhill. That's too bad because he's a legendary wide receiver. But, Zay Flowers nasty. I'd love to have him on my team, but he just I see a lot of disrespect get thrown his way, but it is true. I don't think he is a full true one, you know. Um, but that being said, I think they're gonna have to get someone to play wide receiver over there, and another good wideout. And once they do that, that team will be scary. A coaching switch up, the addition of Max Crosby to that defense, I think the Ravens will be a force to be reckoned with. Um, Speaking of forces to be reckoned with, um, Jason Tatum came back last night. Honestly, I was thrilled watching that. He was a little rusty at first, and then proceeded to have a pretty solid stat line. What was it? 15 points. Do you know the exact stat line off the top of your head, Will?
I don't know the exact stat line, but I know it was a double-double, which for a return game from an injury like that is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's truly just an outstanding performance from Jason Tatum coming back from an Achilles tear, which is a brutal injury, you know. And Tyrese Halliburton, correct me if I'm wrong, he had the same exact injury,
Yeah.
and he's out for the season. So the fact that Jason Tatum was able to come back in record time and throw up a double double is outstanding. And, I think we've talked about it before, but I'm also still impressed with how well the Celtics were able to do without Tatum. I thought that was like, okay, Tatum's out this year. Manage your expectations, right? No, Jaylen Brown carries this team, which sounds different than how I mean it. Plays better than he's ever played, and also everyone steps up. Peyton Pritchard having a career year. You know, you got Derek White continuing to play like the star he is, and signing someone like Bokovic is truly just outstanding, despite the broken finger that needs surgery, I guess, which will probably be a big issue down the line. So, I am really impressed with how the Celtics team has progressed this season without Tatum, and I'm interested to see how much he's gonna play. Like, are they gonna sit him for a game here or there? Um, for the rest of the season, they're probably gonna manage his minutes more. But is he gonna miss games just for recovery or whatever? I don't know if they have any more back-to-back games, but if they do, I'd probably think that they would sit him for one of those, right? But yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what happens there. And then when you hit playoffs, you got Jason Tatum back. You got Jason Tatum back, and he'll probably be back in the swing of things, and won't start the game missing a bunch of shots like he did last night, which I don't hold against him at all. Um, Something I do kind of hold against them is people are talking about, oh, Celtics play great. The Mavericks are also a terrible team. You got to kind of keep that into mind. I mean, Kyrie Irving's out for the season, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But Will, were you impressed by JT's performance last night?
I couldn't have been more impressed with him. As I said, coming back from an injury like that and dropping a double-double in your first game back, that is unbelievable. And I feel like a little bit of the fear, not that there was any doubt that in the long run, Tatum coming back would significantly help this Celtics team, but there is, but I feel like one worry that could have been had was that, the team had developed such a groove without Tatum this season, and could him coming back disrupt the groove that they had found? Not at all. He just fit seamlessly right back in, and the Celtics looked exactly the same as they did um, when Tatum was not able to play. And this to me is the thing that makes the Celtics the scariest right now. I do feel like we have exited out due to the salary cap and stuff like that. I do feel like we've exited out of an era in the NBA when we're going to see teams like the Warriors winning 4 championships in 8 years, because I guess from 2019 all the way to now, we've seen a different team win the championship each season. So we seem to have moved more into that type of NBA era than a dynasty NBA era. That being said, I think the NBA has to be, I think the other teams in the NBA have to be genuinely terrified of this Celtics team as a title contender yet again this year, and here's why. When the Celtics won their championship a couple seasons ago, Jaylen Brown was the conference finals MVP and the finals MVP, which is important to keep in mind. But I still feel like it was pretty clear Tatum is their number one scoring option and their best player, and Brown is their number two scoring option. That has gone completely out the window this season because Jaylen Brown proved this season that he is a number one scoring option himself. Without Tatum, he led the Celtics to the second best record in the Eastern Conference. Now, other teams could have two guys who have both shown that they're number one scorers, and that could negatively impact the team because their egos could get in the way. That is not going to be the case with Tatum and Brown at all. Those are two of the most likable, unselfish players in all of basketball who clearly have a brotherhood and only want what's best for each other. So I feel like the fact that the Celtics, like the whole narrative of Tatum's one, Brown's two, that's been thrown out the window after what Jaylen Brown proved this season. They have two number one scoring options who could both be the leading scorer on any given night. And I feel like that makes them even more dangerous now than they were when they won the championship a couple seasons ago. And if I were the rest of the NBA, I would be very scared of what's cooking up in Boston right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed, like I was saying. But to touch on your Warriors, Will,
Yeah.
eighth place in the Western Conference, 32-30. That's probably not what you wanted, especially with Steph being so banged up this season. What do you think your team needs to improve? And also Jimmy Butler being out for the season probably affects you a lot.
As much as I hate to say it, I feel that the Warriors and they had a huge shocking upset win over the Houston Rockets the other night, which I give them credit for. But I just feel like they are a walking disaster on so many levels right now because from 2020 all the way until now, I now granted, they won in 2022, which was an amazing year and I give them full credit for that. But in every other season aside from that, they've had a season where they've had uh they had a season where they were so bad that they weren't even invited to the bubble in Orlando because Steph had been injured for the majority of the season. They had 2 seasons where they lost in the play-in tournament and didn't even make the playoffs. And then they had, 2 seasons aside from the championship season where they lost in the second round, which is respectable, but not what you would expect, from a team, that is like, the modern NBA dynasty. So I just feel like not that 2022 wasn't amazing, but I feel like in every other year aside from 2022, since that stretch of 2015 to 2019 where they made the finals every season, there are just players getting injured and guys getting older, and it's so negatively impacting the team. And we saw it again this season. Steph, I hope will be back soon at some point, but they were starting to get into a groove, play really well. Then Jimmy Butler went out with a season-ending injury, and when Jimmy
Yeah.
Butler went out with a season-ending injury, that to me marked the end of this season. Now, do I think they'll make the play-in tournament? Yes, but could I see them losing in the play-in tournament? I absolutely could, because if you look at all recent NBA champions, they have a number one scoring option, but they also have a number two scoring option as well. Look at Denver, Jokic and Jamal Murray, the Celtics. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the Thunder, SGA, and Jalen Williams. And the Warriors just do not have a reliable number two scoring option behind Steph Curry right now. And when I saw that they traded for Kristaps Porzingis at the trade deadline, I was just like, oh, that's not going to help them at all because this guy is injury prone and sure enough has some injury and is out with some mysterious illness right now, not
Oh, of
contributing to
course.
the team in any way whatsoever. So I hate to say it because I love the Warriors so much and I'm such a fan of
Sure.
them and I always will be. But I think they are a dying dynasty. And I think the chances of Steph Curry winning another championship in Golden State are close to 0% right now. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think that door might be shut there. There are two things I have to say here. One being kind of, I don't know, I'm interested to see what you have to say. Do you think any of this has to fall on the shoulders of Steve Kerr? Do you think he'll face blame for this? I mean, he's such a
Um,
legendary coach, so like, and he's done so good with his team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if he wasn't such a legendary coach, then criticism would be deserved to come his way. Now, we did see with Bill Belichick, he was a great coach for a long time, but he lost it at the end, and that, and he is not the coach he was now that he was back in the day. But I just think Steve Kerr has proven to be a great coach on so many levels and really took his legacy to another level with that 2022 championship which that they won, which no one saw coming. So, I'm not saying he's perfect. No one is, but I tend to put the blame more on veterans getting older and getting injuries that tend to happen to them as they're getting older. I tend to put more of the blame on that than the coaching job that's being done by Steve Kerr.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can totally see that being true because, like you said, I mean, like you said, he's a legendary coach. But the other thing I wanted to say is, I watch Draymond Green, get older, and you get a little worse as you get older. But you know what I haven't seen change? The way he acts on the court. How do you feel about that from a Warriors perspective? Because I don't like him at all.
I think he's a complicated guy, and I think he always has been. Steve Kerr is somebody who I think has such integrity as a person that when Steve Kerr, said in a press conference a couple seasons ago that if Draymond was that bad of a uh, detriment to the team, that they would have gotten rid of him a long time ago. So I admire Steve Kerr as a person so much that I believe him when he says that. And you don't hear any of Draymond Green's teammates saying bad things about him. I think
He
his
punched
antics
one of his
on
teammates in the face.
Yes, but could Jordan Poole have done but what would cause him to do that? Like Jordan Poole must have said something really really bad and Stephen A came out and said that he has sources that tell him that Jordan Poole escalated that
It
situation and
probably
spiraled it
did.
out of control. So I do think I'm not excusing Draymond for what he did, but I think you also have to think about what could Jordan Poole have said that would cause Draymond to be that angry. So I think he is, he I have, I mean, when he, got a, 20 something game suspension a couple seasons ago, and, finally went to therapy and did some, personal work. I have seen improvement from him since then, but he remains a complicated person to me because he and Steve Kerr had a blow up on the sideline earlier this season. Draymond Green decided to do a podcast with Skip Bayless recently, which I thought was just disgraceful, and try to act like he has respect for Skip Bayless, who is one of the least respectable people in all of sports media. So I think Draymond Green has, um, great qualities that have helped the Warriors win 4
Definitely.
championships, but he's a complicated guy.
Yes.
That has continued to be proven, and it continues to be proven now. I think I think the Warriors have made the right choice sticking with him because he won 4 championships with them. But the complicated stuff, it's part of the Draymond package, and it still is part of the Draymond package. He's a complicated guy, and I've always been the first to acknowledge that.
Yeah, and for me, him, yeah, totally get it. Complicated guy. We've had Kyrie Irving on our team. I understand that, but my main thing, I kind of said it before, is when you're getting worse as a player, you can't still. I mean, like you said, he's gotten a little bit better, but it makes it harder to excuse when you're not bringing what you used to bring to the court, and when you still act a fool. And whether it be stepping on people, throwing elbow, whatever, some getting in fights with Steve Kerr, who's one of the greatest NBA coaches of all time. And like you said, you respect Steve Kerr as a person. So why I just don't understand how you can have a full amount of respect for someone who yells at a great coach, isn't playing at the level he used to play at, I mean, he was never a scorer really, but and he's just not playing at that level. Um, I would be upset if I were a Golden State Warriors fan, but him being complicated, him in the past doing so much for you guys, and definitely still playing a role here. I see where you're coming from. It's not like it's coming from nowhere, the support you have for someone who's been as impactful as Draymond Green. But before we wrap up this podcast, we recently found out that Zendaya and Tom Holland seem to be married. While I hope this information is public because they wanted it to be public, either way, that's awesome. Congratulations to them for sure. I think that's some really cool, um, news. And boy, they sure do both have a bunch of big movies coming up. That's the Hollywood power couple, You got Tom Holland's Spider-Man and then the Odyssey. Is Zendaya? Zendaya might also be in
She
the
is,
Odyssey.
yeah.
That's crazy because she's in the Odyssey. She has that movie with Robert Pattinson coming out in like April, or that might already be out. I kind of forget. It's an A24 movie, so it's probably going to be good. Robert Pattinson's great. Hey, he also has a crazy year. He's in the Batman. He's in 30 other movies. And then she has Dune. And oh yeah, she's also in Spider-Man. I forgot about that. And she has that show Euphoria coming out that she stars in. So yeah, big years coming up for both of those two. So wanted to issue a big congrats before the end of this episode. But with that, thank you for joining me, Will. Thank you all for watching this episode of the Everything Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Probably for Oscars, by the way.